Thank you for joining us today. My name is Scott Smith, and I'm sitting down with Judge Mack to talk a little bit about some of the implications of assisted outpatient treatment from a legal perspective for emergency departments. In our previous in-person trainings and webinars, we've done a lot of talking with you as emergency department personnel about what this could mean for you, what the benefits would be, and some questions have consistently cropped up that we wanted to take a chance to just talk about together and hopefully be of some service to you. And, the first question I would have, Judge Mack, is what are the obligations of an emergency department when somebody presents who's on an assisted outpatient treatment order? Maybe they come in with law enforcement on a pickup order. Maybe they are just known to the hospital because they're familiar faces. What is what is the hospital obligated to do?
Well, the whole point of assisted outpatient treatment is to coordinate and collaborate between hospitals, providers, and the other stakeholders in the system. And at a minimum, the best practice would be that the ED should reach out to the provider of care under the AOT order to let them know the person's in the hospital so they can coordinate the discharge if the person's going to be discharged. But without that coordination of care, we just risk repeated failure. And what that collaboration and coordination is just critical to the success of implementation of the AOT, as well as improving that person's life and reducing involvement with the criminal justice system, reducing hospital use and ED use.
It's a really good point. I know that, at the emergency department I'm on staff at, when we have somebody come in that we see very often, it it does make a big difference when we're able to get a hold of their service provider, when we're able to let them know, because that's going to be key to keeping them from overutilizing our services. So I guess to that end, it seems like the provider, the CMH, maybe even the courts have some obligations as it applies to that individual in the ED. So, what can EDs or should EDs expect from providers, from courts?
Well, the ED should feel free to contact the court if they've got a question about an AOT order, but sometimes there's some confusion. But in terms of the CMH, it varies from across the state. Some CMHs are direct providers of service, others are not. In Wayne County, the direct providers of service are subcontracted to DWIN. So reaching out to CMH is important because CMH needs to know what's going on as well, even if there is a provider separate. But if we're going to make this work, we have to have coordination and communication. Wayne County has started a behavioral health unit to monitor implementation of AOT. And so I think it's important for the emergency department to reach out to the behavioral health unit.
It's really That's really good information. And I know that the efforts of Wayne County's behavioral health unit to try to bridge that gap sometimes between making sure all parties are in the know about a case is really valuable. One of
Well,
the
yeah,
things
there's
we
a
do
risk.
see.
There's a risk. Yeah, excuse me, Scott. Sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah,
but there's a risk of people being in silos and staying in the silos, and we have to connect the silos if we're going to make sure that you've got continuous coordinated care for a person who is in crisis, because they're not in a position to help themselves. The components of the system have to reach out and help that person.
excellent point. Excellent point. So that brings me to my final question. One of the ideas that we've promoted is having emergency departments considering filing petitions for assisted outpatient treatment on the familiar faces that they see. The rationale being that many of these individuals are relatively unknown to the community mental health system. And as a result, they just kind of slip through everybody's fingers who could be working on solving the problem. But of course, that's a new process for EDs. It's not something they've historically done. And there's a lot of reservations in terms of what are they going to be obligated to do? Are they going to have to spend days on end in court? Are they going to be responsible to do extra evaluations and recommend treatment plans? What would an ED be responsible for if it completed a petition for AOT?
In that context, it's important to remember the changes in the mental health code. People commonly think that you've got to be dangerous to self or others in order to have involuntary treatment, which is not the case anymore. The question is, do you understand your need for treatment? And are you at risk of harm if you don't get treatment in the near future? So in this case, people show up at the emergency department. In fact, in 2020, there were 166,000 people who showed up for psychiatric care in emergency departments, and about 18,000 were petitioned. But when a person presents to the emergency department, the question is not, do they require hospitalization? The question is, do they require treatment? And then the second question is, should that treatment be provided in the hospital or on an outpatient basis? And if the immediacy of the risk of harm is not present, it's not great, but the risk of harm is there, then you would need to file a petition for AOT. And emergency departments absolutely should file petitions for AOT. The hearing is scheduled 28 days later. The only requirement is that at the hearing, testimony from a psychiatrist be provided to support the petition. And it's not a terribly burdensome process once the CMH takes over. So the CMH is the agency responsible for securing that testimony and for implementation of a treatment plan. So the emergency department doesn't have a lot of responsibility beyond getting the matter in front of a judge so the issue can be resolved. So if you want to prevent overuse of the emergency department, then make sure that people who are visiting you frequently get treatment of some kind, whether in the hospital or on an outpatient basis.
That's really encouraging news. And just to make sure I understand you correctly, the emergency department can file this petition on someone requesting assisted outpatient treatment, but would not have the responsibility of the other components, the psychiatric evaluation, the treatment planning, the coordination of care. It would merely initiate the process with the court to have that begin, correct?
They would initiate the process, and then they would need to provide testimony at the hearing. When the petition is filed, there's no cert required. It's just a bare petition. You file the petition, the court appoints an attorney, and the process is underway. The hearing is in 28 days. While you have to provide testimony at the hearing, you can also, if you can't find someone to provide that testimony, then you can get a pickup order from the court, and they're taken to a crisis center, and that crisis center provides that testimony. So it's possible that you might have to testify. However, mental health hearings are largely held by Zoom, so you're not going to go to the courthouse, and the hearings don't take a long time, 15 minutes, a half an hour or so. And the hospital ED is not involved in implementation of the AOT at all, but they get the process started. So there is some commitment, but the value of preventing further use of your ED is important. Just for example, in Genesee County, they've got about 400 people on AOT, and they have 90% compliance with treatment plans, and they've seen hospitalization drop 70%. So if you want to see reduction in the use of hospital EDs by persons with serious mental illness, then make sure they get help. If you're not going to hospitalize them, at least if they require treatment, get that petition for AOT going and let the outpatient system take over.
It's really encouraging news. Well, Judge Mack, it's always a pleasure, and I appreciate you taking the time today to help us understand better this process from the legal framework.
Always happy to do that. Thanks for talking to me.